questions. Hi, Dr. Doreen. I have 3 children, 2 twin boys and a girl. Boy has autism and a young 20-month-old boy. The 2 boys are receiving services through Garden Grove full-time. As you know, having 3 kids is frustrating as is, but sometimes I use my louder voice with the girl, and the twin screams, "Ah!" and then he hits his thighs. I realize he hates the yelling. I try to replace his behavior with language like, "Mom, stop yelling," or "Mom, that's too loud," but that doesn't seem to work. And she said, "Help and thanks." It's tough circumstances.
Oh my God. I can't even, I raised 3 typically developing kids, and although pretty much mostly on my own, but it was very, very, very tough, very exhausting. Just kids are a full-time job, and when they have other issues going on, it's so much more work. This is one of those situations, and thank you for sharing this, because that's not something everybody would feel comfortable sharing, but I appreciate that you've shared this, because we all as moms know that we have those moments. And and what's really important, I think, for parents is to realize that you're also human, and you need to get past feeling bad about using your louder voice, because it just is. You get to your last straw, I think, and then you do the best you can.
We don't know anything about that.
We don't know anything about that. As I yelled at Wyatt the other day, because he makes coffee every morning. He thinks he's a barista at Starbucks, and he makes it every morning. But I come in, and all the coffee grounds are all everywhere. Yeah. And I just lost it the other day. I said, "I can't do this every morning, Wyatt. Mommy needs help."
Yeah.
And I'm just going off, and Reed comes into the kitchen and is like, "What are you having a tantrum about?"
Yeah.
And then, I had to lower my voice and then show him how to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
But we all do this.
Yeah, I
We're
yelled
human.
last night, and then I felt horrible afterwards.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. I asked him 3 times to come downstairs, and the 4th time that I said, "Can you come down here?" and he said, "Why?" and I went, "Just come down here! What am I up to bed?"
Which, by the
Lost
way,
my mind.
why? Well, I'm very glad to hear this.
Yeah. It's therapy today.
Yeah. Why is one of the questions you should never yell at. Just FYI. Okay. Why is the one you should always answer? Because why is a great question.
It is.
Okay. It's the best question. Okay. It's the one that means, I'm really considering doing what you want, but I'm smart enough to want to know the reason. It's the best question. But anyway, I know sometimes we get to the point of frustration where they I have this with my kids every night. Dinner time, guys. It's like I tell them half an hour before it's actually dinner time because they won't come down. But so, to answer this question, first of all, we all go through this type of stuff. Secondly, the reason we all go through it is because behaviorally it works for us too. We're frustrated. We're communicating in a not so good way because we're frustrated. But what's really important here is that what you're saying is very doable. You can absolutely teach him to say, "Mommy, please use the lower voice," or something, and maybe that's what you want to do, and that's perfectly fine, but you're trying to do it during the course of real life. And I've always said this, and Shannon always points out, you have to think of these things as individual treatment interventions. You have to work on them not during the course of life. So in other words, you can't do it while it's happening. You kind of have to set it up as a situation and work on it. So, he's doing something. What did she say? What it is that makes her yell?
It's just the daughter that she's yelling at out of frustration.
And then the son
says
is reacting by hitting himself.
But we don't know what the daughter is actually doing to cause that irritation. So, my first recommendation is to kind of identify what it is that your daughter's doing that causes you to get frustrated. That's a little bit more important than having her tell you to lower your voice. It's more important to identify what is frustrating you, because then we can try to prompt your daughter to do things differently so that frustration never really happens. So in other words, are you getting frustrated, let's say as an example, when you have to ask for something 5 times? So what's important is that on the first time that something is asked for, it's prompted and followed up so that it occurs on the first time, rather than letting it fail and then getting you upset and then letting you yell and then having her fix it. So I don't know that it's a good idea ever to get to a point where our kids, if I yell, I don't want my kids honestly, personally, if I don't want my kids to come back and say, stop yelling at me, like that's not going to be very rewarding for me, because I'll feel even worse about it.
Yeah.
So I'd rather they don't do anything that's upsetting to me that I lose it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like adherence to the rules should happen before this.
And I think what's important in what you just said, because the girl in this situation is neurotypical.
Yes.
And so mom is yelling at her, which is causing someone on the spectrum to be upset. And I think a lot of times we forget that we don't just use ABA techniques on kids with autism.
We use them on everyone. Yeah. And so there's so many issues in this. One is, let's try to help your daughter communicate better back and forth between you. Secondly, if your son is disturbed and he's the one that's saying lower your voice, you might want to teach him just to either leave the environment, or if you have your therapists actually work on this, where you set up the scenario, then I guarantee you he will learn to come to you and say, please lower your voice. That's just because right in the moments of frustration where people are yelling, that's not a good place to teach anything. But preferably, none of this should actually be happening. And if we're not able to, I hope we're giving you a lot of support through, I don't know, possibly your insurance. 80% of our kids are now insured in California. So, and now Medicaid is here, Medi-Cal, so we will have coverage for all families through Medi-Cal as well. But, if aside from that, you should know that you have eligibility, obviously, to get respite care from the regional center, and you should push for that. And don't believe anything they tell you. It's completely irrelevant whether you have ABA insurance, whatever. It has nothing to do with it. Your child, whoever needs it, is eligible to get respite. And that means they will pay you for you to use that fund to hire a babysitter or hire someone who can just assist you.
Yeah, you have to fill out a set of documents, the medical waiver, I believe it is.
And just when I feel
overwhelming.
Like it's extremely that's overwhelming, but it's a short. It's like, and we can help too with that. But I just want you to try to get support, because one of the things that maintained my sanity, and I told you this very early on, and you did the same thing, was always having an au pair. I always had someone living with me who would help with driving them, with meals, with whatever, So
it was a very inexpensive way for us. At the time, we did have room in our home.
Exactly.
We don't now, but we did hire several young people from an au pair agency, which is 1/100th of the cost of a nanny you hire in LA.
Absolutely. I think they're like $7 an hour or something that comes down to.
And just before we leave this question, I want to point out too that as a sibling of two brothers who are on the autism spectrum, you expressed your frustration about some of the things going on.
Right.
I'm just going to guess that she's feeling some frustration too. And I know some people use respite for their kids on the autism spectrum so that they can take and go have time with the child who is neurotypical, which sometimes eases some of the stress.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's one of the most critical things is we get so busy trying to put out fires that we forget about our kids who actually are typically developing and need attention. So please do attend to her, and please keep mind of the fact that she might be doing whatever it is that's irritating you because she wants the negative attention. In other words, she possibly is not receiving enough attention. One of the things you can do, and you're in our Garden Grove office, one of my favorite offices, by the way. Hello, Betty Tia, and who runs that office. What I would suggest is that you use our center-based services, and then take your other child out. So, we have a system where you can drop your child off at the center for intervention. It could be any of the regular sessions. It doesn't matter. You can do it once a month. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be on a schedule of any kind. You could just say, can I use center-based today? And those sessions will occur then at the Garden Grove office, and then you can actually take your daughter and do something.
Yeah, go on a daughter date.
Doreen, do you have any tips for moms? Let's say we have certain behaviors where we reach a breaking point and we start to yell, or we start to be so stressed out that we can't handle it. What are some alternatives to that so we don't get to that point? I mean, where we do our own sort of coping skills.
Yeah, I mean, I can list. Thanks. That's a really good question, and hopefully it'll help some people. And there's a ton of stuff, and I'm sure you ladies, both being quite experienced in this, can add to this list, and we can list them. And then the question becomes: are you able to cut off at that moment and actually go and engage in any of these other things? Like, it is up to you for that alarm to go off in your system that says, I need to walk away now from this.
Right.
So, and there's different scenarios. Sometimes you can't walk away, and if you can't walk away because it's of a safety factor, you're in public or whatever it is, then I think, for me personally, closing your eyes and simply breathing to 10 breaths, deep breaths, like, really inhale, and just, even if you're not calming down at all, just do that 10 times, because honestly the change of oxygen will slow you down a little bit.
Yes.
And you just need to do that. That's the very, very minimum.
And it resets you, doesn't it? Kind of
it
gives you a reset.
resets you, as long as there's no dialogue, as long as you're not right in the middle of it, because sometimes we reset ourselves, but it's such a frustrating topic, or you're so exhausted that it just resumes. So that's the situation if you can't leave. If you can leave, just hand the child over to someone else and walk away for half an hour. Half an hour is nothing in the scope of time and life. Just walk away and go do anything. Lay down, close your eyes, breathe, look outside, take a shower, take a bath, smell a candle, anything else. Make some food, whatever it is. Just 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then your heart rate will be back to normal.
Right. And the other thing is that Shannon did a guided meditation.
For stressed out parents.
How can parents find that?
You can find that. It's on iTunes. It's free download. It's 11 minutes, because I know we don't have very much time.
Right.
But you can also find it on our blog. If you scroll down, it's a little ways the download.
And that's something that you can do. If you can't do it on a daily basis, you can't do it for 20 minutes a day, which many of us can't do that.
Right.
But if you have a hard time doing it on your own, I urge you to listen to this and use that, and that will start to calm you just in general.
Absolutely.
I start my day with morning prayer and just a contemplative 20 minutes where I do a meditation. And the days that I don't do it in the morning, and then it usually flies out the window, my day is totally different. I always remember saying that my mother used to say, a day hymned in prayer seldom unravels.
That's really nice. That's beautiful.
And on that note, I want to talk just a little bit about the Autism Act of Love as we go to a break. We're going to be showing someone taking the challenge, a couple of different people seeing the challenge. Maybe if you could tell us a little bit about what kinds of things the funds might go towards.
Let me just tell you what you can be funding, and the awareness too. We don't want to just stress making a donation, because we value you doing the Act of Love challenge and posting it on your social media and challenging other friends, because you never know who's going to make that donation. You never know who that awareness is going to reach. So $100 raised covers 2 hours of intensive ABA therapy that can stop a child from destructive behaviors, that can begin the path of, say, a child who elopes or a child who tantrums. $1,000 can fund a full special needs summer camp to teach a child to socialize, make friends, and form new friendships. The letters we have gotten, Doreen and I can tell you, break your heart, of children who say, it's the first time I've ever belonged, it's the most amazing thing in my life, not to mention the parents saying the stress of having a week, 2 weeks with my child. And then the children always come back more independent.
Yes.
They're so proud of their accomplishments. $3,000 to $5,000 funds an intensive behavioral therapy program, and it can literally be life-changing for a child with severe autism. So those are just some of the things, not to mention assisted technology, assistance dogs, as we said, safety devices, fencing, helmets.
I mean, and let me just try to make it a little bit more real. It's for us, it's very easy, because the three of us, we tend to see a lot of of kids and we know what this really means, but you have to imagine children who are extremely frustrated because they can't communicate, and young children, 5, 6, 10, and all they're doing is running around, hitting people, throwing objects, getting extremely aggressive towards their siblings, towards their parents, not communicating in any way, extremely frustrated, not sleeping, just upset all the time. And we get them an iPad, which is what, $500, right?
Yeah.
And we put software on it for another $100 or $200 or whatever. And that device, we then spend maybe, a month teaching the child how to use the device to communicate, just with just pictures and things they want. And their life changes completely. The entire family changes completely, because everyone is now, the child is, I have some of my most severe kids are able to use their iPads and just to be able to say, this is what I want. Some of my kids who we never thought would, and they're not speaking, and they're 10, 12 years old, and they're non-verbal kids, are texting into iPhone now, things like, hey mom, there's Toys R Us, let's go shop. Crazy stuff that changes these kids and changes their families' lives. So this is really, really effective dollars.
It's life-changing.
The other thing we found, Doreen, with the iPad program is that we oftentimes find hidden talents in these children.
Oh, yes.
Talents for drawing,
music,
animation,
and so on.
music.
Yes.
We have a little boy that we gave an iPad to a couple of years ago, and he's become quite the filmmaker.
Right.
He is, videoing everything.
That's right.
He sends me videos all the time.
That's right. Good point. Thank you for pointing that out to me.
And some of the therapists have contacted me saying that the children they're working with, once they've gotten this iPad, they've seen huge gains.
Huge gains. Yes, so, I agree.
So I love hearing directly from the therapist when they're working with children that have gotten a grant, because it's just so gratifying to see that they feel it's made a difference.
That's right.
All right, now getting back to some of the questions, I want to acknowledge somebody wrote in just before the break, because we were talking about another overwhelmed mom, and they wrote in and said, thank you for the overwhelmed mom question. Bless your hearts for sharing your experiences. It's good to know we're not alone, and you gave some very good suggestions. Going through the same thing with my neurotypical child. She is more my problem child, and I realized that there is no plan to handle behaviors for her while we have one for my autistic boy, and thank you. I think that's very common.
And it is really common, and it's the squeaky wheel thing.
Yes.
It's like we have to pay attention to the child that we feel needs it most, and we forget that our other kids need the same attention. We just completely forget that.
And that the same techniques work on them.
Yeah. The same techniques work on them, and let's just touch that for a minute. What does that mean? That means, in very, very short ABA language, you don't give attention for the bad behavior. You're supposed to give attention for just good behavior. This is why I make sure that no matter what is going on in my life, and my life is pretty crazy, and next year will be even more crazy with travel, but I make sure that I have specific activities with each of my kids that are on consistent, regular, ongoing, because that's where I can give them attention.
They want the attention.
Absolutely. I mean, and the same holds true for our spouses. We forget that.
Right.
And it's just a matter of, and it's not a lot of time. I know all of us say, I don't even have 20 minutes, but the truth is, a lot of us do things in that 3 times a week, 20 minutes, we work out.
Right.
So add 2 more 20-minute time frames for one of your kids, or just for yourself to rest.
It actually takes less time to do that than to deal with the problems.
Until
you start to do it, you don't believe that, but it takes less time.
And coming from the perspective of being growing up with a special needs sibling, my brother had Down syndrome, and my parents were so focused on him that I oftentimes felt left out. And I started in my teen years kind of doing some rebellious behavior because I wanted attention.
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't getting any. So, okay, if I was being good and I wasn't getting attention, why don't I'll be bad and get attention.
Right.
So we have to realize, too, that a lot of these rebellious behaviors are a cry out for just getting attention.
But you know, and I just, not to touch on this too much, but I don't want our moms to feel guilty about this as well, because I do want to say that it's looking at you both, you know, being siblings, and some of my other people who are very high up at CARD. They're siblings. I always say this, that if you have a sibling with a disability, it just, on the one hand, you do get less attention, possibly. The family is struggling more, but you know what? It turns you into a much stronger person and a much more empathetic person. And like sometimes I see, for instance, some of my people they take it personally, you know, like they're like, this is not okay, what's happening. I'm going to fight this so-and-so. And I know it's because they are on that side. They've had a sibling. They know what it's like, you know?
Yeah, it was a gift. And, I mean, there's definitely a silver lining to these things. And my father used to always say to me, God's not made a mistake with you having a child with autism, because you had David and you knew how to deal with David, and now you're a gift to another child.
That's right.
So
that's right.
All right, I want to move on to the next question. Really intense question. Hi, I want to know who I should ask for an autism assessment. I have asked my psychiatrist about it, but I felt he didn't understand me because I have problems with expressing. I can't work or go to school because I have meltdowns and tantrums, and I just don't know what to do. I also have cerebral palsy. Thank you.
Wow. I'm not surprised that you spoke with a psychiatrist and they didn't have much of an understanding of what you're requesting. I don't know where you live. It's difficult to find the right person to provide an assessment for you, and I'm assuming you're an adult, and it's difficult because you have been functioning in the real world. Perhaps you've been having a lot of problems, but you've been functioning. So you most likely will not get a diagnosis of ASD. You may have features of ASD, and I don't know, you may get a diagnosis of ASD. This kind of brings me back to the last week when Jerry Seinfeld had made that comment. You know, Jerry Seinfeld made a comment saying that he felt he had he was on the spectrum, and of course he's not on the spectrum. He sort of shares some of the similarities or some of the key aspects of the spectrum, but unless you have enough of a disability, it's not really considered a disorder, right? So the symptoms have to be severe enough and enough in number as well. So for your purposes, I would try to seek out a psychologist who has autism experience or works with individuals with autism rather than a psychiatrist. I'm trying to think, depending on where you are, you know, there are centers where if you can look up online and find behavioral treatment centers and look and see if they have licensed psychologists. See, if you can't go to see a BCBA, because a BCBA, a board certified behavior analyst, is not allowed to diagnose, won't be able to give you a clear understanding of what your issues are. But a lot of or some ABA organizations now also employ licensed psychologists who have a very strong behavioral background. That's the type of person that I would suggest you see.
If they're in California, would the regional center be able to do anything?
The regional center, not really. The regional centers are so far behind in California now that Medi-Cal is, Medi-Cal depends on the regional centers to do their assessments, so the regional center system is not able to keep up anymore. We actually are doing a ton of their assessments, just assessments. So if you're near a CARD site, get in touch with us because we do assessments out of all of our sites now. And if you're not, get in touch with our assessment center. Maybe they can refer you to someone. A lot of our assessors are from different locations in the country. And if you like, you can write back to Shannon, and I can try to help find you someone in your area. Shannon's also very good at finding people for you.
I'm trying to connect now to have a person in every state that I can say, I can call them and say, in your state, what's this? I'm working on that.
And let's not forget the website Love My Provider.
Yes.
I don't know what's state you're in. They don't cover every state yet, but if you look up Love My Provider, it's a reference sort of resource website where you put in your zip code and it tells you all the providers in your area.
Okay.
And this is not necessarily autism specific. You very well could find in there a psychologist or someone who can help with diagnostic issues.
Can we talk just for a second about, because what I hear in this question is that even with their psychiatrist, they're having problems with expressing, and then in the next sentence they say, I have tantrums and meltdowns. And to me that sounds like, well, of course you would. If you had trouble expressing yourself, that's prime setup area to have tantrums and meltdowns.
It's amazing. I have some people, there's one person in particular who works for me, and I often think, I wish I could have a different relationship with this person. Obviously, I can't because they're an employee, but I see so many psychological issues that I could help them with. I completely read that person's energy, and I know completely that they're just afraid of interacting. And I think it's, for whatever reason, a lot of us have little issues that, you have tantrums and meltdowns because you are possibly you don't feel like you can express yourself in a way that's acceptable or understood. Possibly you have so many other frustrations that are gathering and you're not able to deal with the whole picture. Possibly you don't have an outlet. There's a million different reasons why we have meltdowns, and like the kids that are on the spectrum and with whom we work, frustration, meltdowns and tantrums it's not like they're a neurological problem. No, they're frustration. They're an outlet, they're a form of communication. When we have meltdowns, we are trying to communicate that we've had enough, that we need something to change. And if we are able to communicate that before having the meltdown, and if things actually do change, then we won't have the meltdown. So, meltdowns, what you need, aside from the diagnosis, is obviously some ways to help yourself. Just like you were saying earlier, Nancy, it's like teaching yourself when you're recognizing the symptoms of when you're about to have a meltdown so that you can walk away and just have a calm moment and reason things a little differently. Now, you may have a problem with that. You may have difficulty where you need assistance. Someone needs to help you to reason things differently, to have a different point of view. Many people have issues with seeing other people's perspective, many people do. So these are all things that you might find helpful for you. I don't know, Shannon, do you think this person might benefit from some of the lessons on skills?
I absolutely do.
Yeah.
I absolutely do. I think that there are so many, I know as an adult who is not on the spectrum, when I read through the lessons and skills, like the social language, especially section, and the executive function, I saw so many things that I could be doing differently to have a better life.
Right.
And I thought, my first thought was every single junior high and high school student in the world should have to read through those because it's so educational. But I also thought of all the things that I could be doing better and all the adults that I knew that were struggling with some aspect of their life that involved social situations or communication or just following through with things that could benefit.
Right.
We're not talking about kids, and we're not talking about kids on the spectrum here. We're talking about adults
who
are having their lives, otherwise everything is working, but I think everybody has a part of their life that they think, this isn't working and I'm frustrated.
Right.
And I think they could all benefit from
And it usually
skills.
has to do with communication.
Yeah, it does.
Often.
Yeah, it really often does, and or our internal expectations of ourselves and others. And it's, as you were saying, saying all this, I was just thinking to myself, so many of my friends often come to me and ask me what to do with their kids who are typically developing kids, you know.
Course.
And I think to myself, it would be awesome if we have, you know how we have like Huntington Educational Centers or whatever, those places that that teach kids tutoring, you know. It would be amazing if we could have just behavioral centers where you could just go in.
There's a huge need for that.
Right. And
now you're developing yet another thing for you to do.
Right. Well, I mean, that would be very easy to do, and I would do it. Okay. The only issue with it is that there's no funding for it, right? I mean, it's almost like the system funds only the most severe problems.
Yes.
And so, you know, obviously, though, there's also no funding for things like Huntington. You know, we pay money to them to tutor our kids.
Yeah. And I think a lot of parents would be willing to pay money for their typical kids to learn how to
just manage life. Yeah.
Well, let's be honest. There are a bunch of single men who would go to that behavioral center just to find out how to talk to women. Right?
That's true.
That's what they would do. Okay, I want to move on because I've got 2 more questions I want to squeeze in. Hello. What are some helpful classroom interventions for PDD-NOS? My daughter is in kindergarten and is struggling with finishing her work, listening to the teacher, and is not at the same level academically with the rest of her class. And I said, thank you.
There's a lot you can do. And congratulations, because you have a high-functioning child in regular education. It's not going to be, you're sort of on the downslope now, you know, like this is easy stuff. It may seem very hard, but it's the fun and easy stuff. I think you would, you know, there's a million things that you can do to assist a child in school. I'm trying to think of the fastest resources I can give you. One is Skills, obviously. You should go on Skills. This is skillsforautism.com. You would want to, and you have a free trial period, I believe, so I would suggest that you go straight to the, after you answer the assessment questions, you go straight to the section having to do with executive functioning, social curriculum, and cognition curriculum. Those 3 areas will really, really benefit you in terms of learning more about high-functioning kids and the issues they have. The other thing that would benefit you is the BIP Builder, which is also part of Skills, and so you would answer some questions about the types of behaviors. So we often talk about challenging behaviors as like, you know, hitting, but very honestly, inattention is a challenging behavior, or, you know, not paying attention to the teacher, those types of things, they're all challenging behaviors. So those types of things can be addressed through the BIP Builder. It's a place where you can list your behavior. It's actually the indirect functional assessment first, the CFA. You'll say this is a behavior that's challenging to me, and the system will ask you a bunch of questions about the behavior, when it occurs, what's usually done, that sort of thing, and it'll help you identify the reason for the behavior, and it'll help you identify how to deal with the challenging behavior and the types of interventions you can use. Now, another resource that would be good for you is IBT, Institute for Behavioral Training. When you go on their website, they have a list of training modules, and in there you'll definitely find things for school shadowing, what a good shadow should do in school. That'll help. And all the techniques that we use in general, just everything in terms of not paying attention to bad behaviors, how you redirect behaviors, how you shape a behavior, all of that stuff is on IBT. So I think, you know, as a parent who is dealing with a high-functioning individual who is, you're looking at high-level stuff here. It's not the basic stuff that you could get from just any ABA program. I really recommend you kind of educate yourself a little bit more, and I think IBT will help with that.
And then you can educate the teacher, too.
Yes.
We're coming up on the holidays when you're going to want to gift to your teachers and aides, and you can gift those IBT trainings. Pick the one you want, or the 3 that you want, or the 10 that you want, and gift them to your aide or your teacher.
This year, now that you reminded me, I am going to do this.
That's what I'm going to do.
This year, I'm actually going to give a free license or number to all the parents to give to their teachers.
Oh,
and I think
it's
that's
Christmas!
What we need to do. Yeah. And every year you've told me, and this is the first year now I have time to do it.
I want to give it to Wyatt's teacher. This mom's situation begged the question for me, what kind of supports is she getting from her school district?
Yeah.
Because her child with PDD-NOS should not be just thrown into a general inclusion class with no supports.
Yeah.
I'm hoping she gets services from her district.
What are great?
Yeah. And often that's difficult because when you get that, I had PDD-NOS.
I had PDD-NOS when Wyatt was moderately autistic. They misdiagnosed him. So you don't get anything, and you need to go in that IEP and make sure your daughter is getting what she deserves.
Well, first you have to fight for the IEP when you have PDD-NOS.
Right.
It's not a given that you'll get one, but fight for one, or at the very least a 504 plan so that you get services. And then you'll have more. But I honestly think you'll get more traction out of teaching the teachers what to do via IBT.
Right.
Which is
the teacher has to be willing.
That's true, but if the teacher isn't willing, it's time to get a new teacher.
Absolutely.
I'm an ex-teacher, and a teacher who doesn't want to learn isn't a teacher. Move on.
No, it's true. No, it's very true. And you both have really good points. Can I just say before the end of the show, and I know we want to answer more questions, but I loved doing a show with the two of you. I think we covered more stuff than we ever do, and it's just so many different perspectives. I feel like we should do this more.
Well,
we will.
I'd love to.
Awesome I'd love to. I think it's great when we share our my experiences with Wyatt and Shannon's experience with Jem, and we're so open about that, and I love to say what's worked for me, what hasn't worked for me. And yesterday, having Atticus Baldwin, who's on the spectrum on the show, and Dominique Brown, was so interesting to watch the phenomenal talents of these two young men, and they were just so entertaining and amusing. We'd like to have more kids actually on the spectrum join us.
But can I say, too,
that's a great idea.
Watching their moms react to them was also something that was very rejuvenating with me.
It was
both of those moms were just in a place of acceptance of this is my child, and my child is gifted and talented and wonderful, and it was really wonderful because I pick at Jem and go, don't do this, stand up this way, don't breathe that way, don't do this.
Why don't we do something like that? Why don't we at least offer to our kids to do a segment here, or to do acts of love challenge,
and do acts of love,
and air it here.
Have your children do it.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm trying to squeeze in more questions here. I want to deal with what we had on Facebook. We had some parents, a group of parents, write in about center-based versus home-based when you're homeschooling.
Right.
So what is the sort of configuration? They want to know how many hours a day of home-based ABA would you recommend for parents who are homeschooling, and then what's the right configuration? Other parents jumped on that and said, if you're homeschooling already, do you go to home? How many hours do you want in the home? How many do you want in the center?
Every child is going to have a different thing happening, and I can't respond to that because it really depends on the personality and the characteristics and skills of the child. If I have and the age. If I have, let's say, a 5-year-old who's very severe, then I'm going to want way more ABA than school. If I have a really high functioning, let's say 8-year-old, I'm going to want very little ABA, much more school. And but if it's homeschool, then that changes things again because regular school functions as education as well as a social environment, and so the center-based programs that we now have somewhat provide that social environment. Again, it depends on the functioning level of the child because we don't have typical kids in our programs. We have an array of kids. Some of our kids are extremely high functioning, and what we try to do in our center-based programs is we try to pair the kids up at some point. So in other words, they'll have their one-to-one program, and then they'll have social activities with kids similar to them, or so that they're not modeling. We don't allow our kids to do bad behavior, so it's not like they will have any bad models. They won't, but we really do want to pair our kids up as much as possible for social programs. Now, having said that, we are opening up a whole ton of schools. So that's our thing now.
What ages will it serve, Doreen?
It's funny that you say that. When we opened our Virginia school, it was just, I think we opened it with very young, 4 till, I want to say 10 or 8. And that was the first 12 kids. And then right after that, we learned that we can expand it. So we expanded it all the way up to 18. And now so we moved into a bigger spot so that we could double our kids, and that's full now.
Okay.
That's great. Instantly. So now I asked Marianne, who's our senior supervisor, has opened offices, has run offices or clinics, and BCBA, of course, and is now superintendent of our schools. She is now going to be, the next 2 locations are here in California, Woodland Hills.
Okay.
And Phoenix Chandler area. Okay. So we're doing one in Arizona, one here, and then we're opening another one in the Torrance area. We're starting this now, and it's a non-public school, so it's the same funding we get from school districts.
Okay.
And school districts tend to like them more of non-public schools than agencies because it's a center and it has to follow some of the regulations a little bit differently. Parents love them because you're dropping your child off and they're getting actually ABA.
Right. While they're being educated.
While they're being educated, right? Because it's a school, it has to follow the California curriculum. It does. I don't know if you know, but our academic portion of skills does follow. It matches the California curriculum.
Know that. Great to know.
So, but it's only, it doesn't cover all the areas. Our schools will, obviously. Right. So, and homeschooling, actually, it's interesting. I'm getting this question so much more now. It's become so popular, not just homeschooling, but what is it called? Independent schooling, I think is what it's called, where kids are just taking courses online from places like BYU and so on, online, and they're just graduating that way, which is fascinating for me that's happening.
And a great option for many of our kids on the spectrum.
Fantastic option for many of our kids. And I think to myself then, for this family to kind of give closure, the main thing, so it's not about the balance of hours, it's about the balance of activities. So you want to make sure you have the educational portion, you have the ABA, which is dealing with not just behaviors, but actually teaching all the minute skills. And then you want to make sure you have the social portion in place. So some combination of those 3, and every child is different.
And it's always, I always find every year that mix changes because...
It changes every year, correct.
Because in the beginning we had to focus so much on Wyatt's behaviors.
There you go.
Because with those behaviors, no way would he access a curriculum.
There you go.
I mean, if my child was verbally stimming and doing physical stereotypy and not focusing, he's not going to be able to do the academics.
Right.
So we had to put a heavy focus, ages 5 through, say, 10, on the behaviors.
Just behavior.
Then we're moving more into the academics because he's accessing the curriculum better.
Yeah.
And now we're going to be playing catch up. So sometimes it's constantly shifting, and then there's always the social
and the biological changes, right? I mean, biomedically they change. Puberty and so on and so forth. Right. Sleep. I mean, there's so many factors that influence our kids, and therefore it changes everything else.
But always, I think, my advice for parents would be to know that it's a constantly shifting thing, and be willing to make adjustments in the academic, the social, and the behavior based on how your child is progressing.
Absolutely. We're totally out of time.
I know. Are you guys you're going into your show now?
Yes, and we're going to continue to read these.
Good.
Yes, we are.
We are going to continue.
I know you haven't. I hadn't seen a lot of these, and I want our board members to hear them.
So not only do I just real quickly, I'm sorry, I'm going into your time, but I really would like to frame these.
Yes.
Like these are unbelievable. Like they're just amazing. And this is a handful, I think, and I'm pretty sure we get so many more.
There are so many more.
And do you know what I would love? I mean, and I'm really going to follow up with this, Shannon. I would love an entire wall of these. And we're moving, as you know, from here in March or so. And let me just say, I really want to follow up on this. This just made my day.
I know.
Honestly made my day.
I think one of the things that I try to do at Act Today is pick up the phone myself or get on the phone when I hear Amy and Elizabeth on with a parent, and I'll get on and I'll just say, hi, this is Nancy, the executive director.
That's right.
Tell me about you, tell me about your child. And what I always say to them, usually it's the mothers that I'm on with, and I say, you're a great mom, and invariably they break down.
Yeah.
And I say, you're a great mom because you're pursuing this.
Yeah.
You want the best for your child.
Right.
And don't let anybody take that away from you.
Right.
And so many times they have not been told
what
great parents they are.
It's so true. And they're the ones that deserve it the most.
Yeah.
because they're the ones under the most stress, working the hardest, doing everything they can for their kids to.
But staying in touch with the people you serve when you're a nonprofit is so important, and these letters mean everything.
And we are going to read one of these in just a second, so pick which one you want to read. But I just want to address very quickly, because we had a parent in Los Angeles write in asking where to get assessments for a 7-year-old with difficulty managing emotions. Just want to give a shout out to you that you're here in Los Angeles. The CARD has an assessment center here.
Yes.
You can go onto the site centerforautism.com and find the assessment center, and you can make an appointment, and they will take care of you.
And make sure you tell them, and let me just tell you, the person that you want to talk to is Marina Liedke. She oversees and manages the assessment center. And I want to really suggest, make sure that you tell them if your child is or is not on the spectrum.
Yeah, she wants to know what type of assessments do we need to figure out what it is and then find solutions. Will they be able to tell her
It'll be based on, she won't, but she'll schedule a time for you to speak to one of the psychologists. And more than likely, if your child is just having emotional problems, then the psychologist will probably contact me. We have a variety of psychologists, so I don't know which one you'll be speaking to, but they'll probably be talking to me to say, these are the issues, what tests do you recommend? So we have, hundreds of tests that are for every different aspect of child development. So.
Okay, so we thank you.